Something I'm sure you guys are really interested in, of course, is like, how do you afford such an expensive school? Which is, of course, what I talk about in my videos, right? I talk about scholarships and grants. Those of you that might be interested in a similar background as me, international relations, international development, well, there's so many schools out there, but if you're interested in the US, you just have to go through a process of like research. I'm going to be putting some links in the description box down below, taking you to the specific websites of the universities that I looked at, and also the ranking and the list that I checked to kind of like determine what school I would want to go to. So to start with, what am I doing exactly? And how did this get to be, right? So I'm going to be starting my master's in international development. The program is actually called Global Human Development, but you can say international development at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, right now, of course, I'm studying online as many other people are doing. And I hope that as soon as things get better, I can move to Washington, D.C., go to the U.S. and actually study this amazing, fascinating program that, brings all my interest and passion together, where I can learn, grow, and also build a community around people that, have the same interest and have the same passion for the things that I have passion for. So that's something I look forward to. Despite it being online, I've had my first week, and I can just say, if I evaluate the first week, it's been good. The classes are very, very interesting. The professors are very nice, and they're ready to help anytime you need them. So that's something that I really appreciate from this program. And the reason why, I chose Georgetown, I'm going to explain very soon now. It's because, I just loved, the program, the professors, and the environment I would be learning in. But if you're interested in the US, you just have to go through a process of like research. I'm going to be putting some links in the description box down below, taking you to the specific websites of the universities that I looked at, and also the ranking and the list that I checked to kind of like determine what school I would want to go to. And I had in mind different schools, but because of, but depending on the courses that were offered, I was more interested in one program or the other. But most of them have similar programs. It's more about, the way that I felt when I communicated with the admissions office, and the way they treated me in the whole process that made me, decide to go for Georgetown University. So my journey towards grad school actually started last year around the month of October. But actually before October 2019, I already knew that I was either going to study in the US to pursue my graduate program, or actually go to China. Back then, I had a very big interest in Asia before all the pandemic happened. And I wanted to do, a master's in international relations at that time. But also when I was considering the different master's program, I felt that I really wanted to do a program that would be more specific and specialized. So I was already thinking back then, based on my experience working in youth development and activism, I felt that I wanted to do something related to international development. But I thought I would actually go for an international relations program and then, specialize in international development. But then, just when I started looking for different programs, specifically in the USA, I looked at different, publications, different listings of the top graduate schools in the US. I thought about schools, in New York, such as, the CPA school, at Columbia University. I thought of course, Princeton University, the program in international affairs. I thought of Middlebury School with their program in international relations. I also thought about different schools in Washington, for example, George Washington University. But out of all that list, I never actually thought I would apply. But out of all the list, I wasn't. And out of all those lists, what I noticed was that Georgetown University, which is the university I'm actually attending this year, hooray, I saw on the list that Georgetown had a really good ranking, and I started reading more about their program, all of the schools, the history behind the school, how good the programs are, and the courses. So my first advice when it comes to looking for the program you want to study in a specific country, let's say in the US, you have to look at all the schools that exist, that might really be a good fit for you in terms of, the program they're offering, the courses, the professors, the prestige of the school, and what exactly, would attract you as a person, or why would this school be a great fit for you? You can ask this question to yourself: why do I want to go to this school? Because at the end of the day, you have to write a motivation letter where you have to convince these people, the committee, that you want to go to this school and this school is the right one for you. So for me, I did that, internal personal exercise of like seeing why Georgetown would be a good fit for me, I also applied to Middlebury School because their program, had one in the East Coast and in the West Coast. So I was interested in this merge of kind of like seeing the US from two perspectives. So I applied to both schools, but in the long run, when I was applying and I got accepted into both schools, actually, my motivation letter, I'm going to make a video about that another day. I explained, why this program really were a good fit for me, what I liked about the school, the professors. But what I noticed was that if I wanted to study international relations, specifically international development, it has to be in a place where, that's the hub of international development or international relations. And in this case, it is Washington, right? So Georgetown University is located in Washington, and all the, international organizations, everything related to the UN, politics, and economics is mostly in Washington. So I thought, okay, this has to be the right place for me, because I would not only get access to this amazing university and all the resources in terms of the professors, the alumni, and also the work opportunities, but also I'm going to be able to network. Of course, networking has changed a bit now because of COVID, everything is online. But when things, were still sort of like normal out of COVID, it was more about, what networking events can I go to? Who can I meet? How can I extend my knowledge about the field? And, how can I learn from the best of the best? And most of the best are found in Washington. So for me, the location was a very important point in order to kind of like decide to go to the school. So once I kind of like figured out all these things in terms of like, okay, this is what I want to do and this is where I want to do it, I learned more about the courses, and the more I read about it, the more fascinated I was about, what Georgetown had to offer. So in this case, Georgetown courses, which I'm currently doing, I just finished my first week of school, and it's been intense, a lot of readings, a lot of work to do, and a lot of like self-study. But basically the courses go from studying, economic development, economic growth, understanding economics as a whole branch, and then its relation with economic development, and how, how and why, poor countries are facing, the current conditions they're in, and what makes them difference between rich and poor countries, and also, this trend of divergence and convergence. I don't want to use economic terms because I myself am still learning, but just understanding, what makes countries richer and what makes other countries poorer based on their history, their past, and also, their political status and their governance. So for me, I was really interested in a program that would teach me a lot about this, but something that made Georgetown stand out the most was that it has a specific program in quantitative, method. So we have a program. So we have a course focus on that, where we're going to like hone our quantitative skills. And that's something I really like because I come from a linguistic and language background. So I wanted a program that would help me and allow me to learn more about, quantitative methods, and how, I can use that in my development career, because that's really, really important, not only to know, from the readings and the more qualitative part, but more like the quantitative understanding is very important. And I lacked a background in economics. I like a background in, quantitative methods. So for me, that really felt very interesting, because they would teach all of us, even though we don't come from that background. And at the end of those 2 years program, we would be able to, have a better understanding of how this works, and we can apply it to our real work. Something I'm sure you guys are really interested in, of course, is like, how do you afford such an expensive school? Which is, of course, what I talk about in my videos, right? I talk about scholarships and grants. And of course, the way that I can afford this, is also by applying to scholarships and grants that have allowed me to, to kind of like get my dream studies. So in my case, I've been granted scholarships. I've been granted a school scholarship, so from the program itself, which funds part of my studies. So they have different fellowships. So in the case of Georgetown, if you apply to the program, you'll be granted, it depends on the person and your situation, your motivation, but you'll be granted from about maybe 20% to even maybe 70% or even 100%, depending on the person. In my case, I was granted part of my tuition, and then the remaining part of the tuition, it's going to be covered through my scholarship with FULBRIGHT program, and also through my scholarship with Rafael del Pino Foundation, which is a foundation based in Spain. As a Spanish citizen, I was able to apply to that. I went through, a long process, like literally from the end of last year. So from let's say November, December, until the month of June this year, that I went through all this essay writings, the interview process, in order to, achieve this scholarship that I have now, that allow me to kind of like, fulfill my dream studies. In terms of like what have I learned and the tips that I would give someone who's interested in applying to American schools and what they can do in order to be successful as I have been, what I would say is that, give yourself time. But I think this applies to any application and to any scholarship application you want to go to, not only for grad school, but also scholarships, especially for American schools that are so expensive. My program, just the tuition fee, if I'm not mistaken, for this year, it's about $53,000. I'm going to show you guys. And all this information, of course, you can see on the official website of each school. Some schools are cheaper, some schools are more expensive. As I said, I did apply to Middlebury School, and that one was a bit cheaper than Georgetown. But because, as I said, I wanted to be in Washington, I thought that Georgetown would be a better fit for me. So basically, when you're applying to these schools, you, besides considering the time factor that you have to put a lot of effort into applying, you have to also see how you can make your application stand out in order for them to kind of like give you much more money through the school funding, so that when you have to apply for scholarships, you can only apply to maybe 1 or 2 or 3, of course, but at least that if you secure one more scholarship, you're good. Because besides the $53,000 that are for tuition, you also have to think about your maintenance. Of course, right now, because of COVID, I'm living at home in the UK, but normally if I was to move to Washington, I would have to think about my monthly expenses, right? And as you know, Washington is not a very cheap city. I haven't lived there, but I've been checking before going there. And that's one of the things that shocked me the most, especially coming from this European background, where, first of all, education is either free, depending on the countries, if it's Germany, if it's France, or to being very cheap. For example, in Spain, for a master's program, you will be paying maybe $4,000 to $6,000, which is considered expensive depending on the program itself. So coming from that background where education is relatively cheap or just free, to a totally different system to the US, where education is more like a privilege, which is also kind of like related to what I'm studying, right? How can education be a privilege, right? Like some people have access to it if they can, access loan, or even their parents can pay for the universities, and others do not have access to university because they just cannot afford it, right? And they have to, either work first or even get a loan, and then, have debts on their lives, on themselves for the rest of their life. This is not something people should be doing, right? Having all this crazy, ridiculous amounts of debts that you can't even imagine. So think about that when you're applying to American universities. I do think that there is a lot of pro to go to an American university, at least in my case. I wanted to experience a different way of doing, a different way of teaching method, interaction with students, something that I've seen in comparison to my program in Spain. Even when I did my master's there, is that classes are more interactive here. Like you do your readings, you go to class, and then the professor kind of like builds upon that. And for someone that comes from the European style, you just hear a lot of lectures from professors that just talk, and you don't get that much interaction, I would say. I might be wrong. It depends on the country. Also, I'm speaking from the Spanish perspective, and also through my Erasmus in Germany and Austria, it's more like the lecture style. And in the US, I think in general, it tends to be more like a dialogue between the students and the professor. So that's a big pro that I think, also attracted me to the US system. But of course, the first con, as I've said before, is the economic, restriction, that it's so expensive that it's hard for you to kind of like fund that on your own unless you have the money. Something that I also think is a pro for American schools is that despite being expensive, the school typically gives their students at least some type of, tuition reduction. And what you can also do is that you can tell them, hey, this is my financial status or my financial situation, I need a financial aid. And as far as I know, for American citizens, they can apply to something called FAFSA. I can't remember what it stands for, like federal something. But for those that are not American, you can tell the school that you would like to apply for maybe extra financial aid, or you can apply to fellowships. In the US, fellowships are a big thing. So the idea of a fellowship is kind of like a scholarship, but it comes mostly from like foundations or like endowments that the school gets. So you can apply to those maybe through an essay, mostly through an essay, a competitive written essay, which you can apply to, and then you can get, so that it can help you towards your tuition. So these are called merit-based aid, which is based on your merit, your academic performance, your professional performance, whatever you've done before. But there are also other ones which is just like, based on your financial status, like, if you need money, they can give you more money because of your financial situation, which is a very good thing. Besides that, you should always consider applying to fund out of the uni. So for example, as I did, I went to different foundations in Spain. I applied for those even without the school being involved. I just said, this is my program, this is what I want to do. And, the foundation has a call every year where they, help young people, in this case, Spanish people who want to study abroad, especially in top universities around the world. So my school is a top university. So I was like, okay, this is my, let's say, motivation letter, but more like a statement. Like, actually, I wrote like a 10 pages statement where I explained kind of like all my life goal, what I wanted to do, and why it's important for someone like me to get that help so that I will be able to study what I want to do, and then in return do all the things that I want to do in the future, right? So I wrote that and I sent it to two foundations. One I didn't get, and the other one I obviously got, which is the one I said before. And then I applied for FULBRIGHT, which is more, as I said in my video, which I'm gonna put the link here. It's more like a bilateral program, with Spain, where you can actually, apply to in your country, in their commission, and then they interview you if you pass the first phase, also very competitive. And then based on that, you can get not only money for your tuition, but also money to, cater to your need while you're in your university. So for example, as I was saying before, Washington is super expensive. So who's going to pay for my rent? Who's going to pay for my monthly, bills? Who's going to pay for my feeding, right? Or, how do you survive when you're actually studying? You just don't go to study, but you have to survive, take care of yourself while you're there. So in my case, with FULBRIGHT, I get a monthly stipend, which, I can link to you guys and you can see how much that is. And also, every country sort of like differs, but the money they give you, or the stipend they give you, tends to cover everything you need normally, depending on the state you go to. I have some Fulbrighters, that's what we call the people who get to Fulbright, that tell me that, I study for example, in San Francisco, which is crazy, even more expensive than Washington. So the rents are very high. With the money I get, it only covers my rent. It doesn't cover anything more, but at least you get your rent covered, right? So, you can combine different scholarship, different funds together to kind of like, survive during your studies. So for me, as I always say, I would never recommend anyone to go into debt, in order to finance the graduate program. There are always ways, website, as I've shared in this video, where I mentioned 8 websites that are useful for you to find, funding for your graduate program. You can always apply to as much as possible, because there are ways to finance your studies if you really believe and you really want it. Don't go into, debts that will keep you kind of like in bondage for years and years because you have to pay them back. But of course, sometimes, if you don't get any scholarship, you have no other option, sort of. But I think that, before, getting a loan, there are always other ways that you can kind of like, find to finance your studies. So, in a nutshell, I'm super excited about my program. As I said, I've started a week ago. It's been intense, but super interesting. The learning curve is, it's like this. Right now, it's a bit hard to get all the concepts, but honestly, in 1 week, the economic terms I've learned, the things that I've, discovered has been so enriching, and I can't wait to, start this 2-year journey where I'm able to kind of like expand my knowledge, my network, and also, connect with people that have the same passion, as I said, as me. So yeah, in my next video, I'll be explaining, what it feels like to study at home and, study on Zoom for almost 24 hours. But it's a new experience, but I hope that, I can make the best out of it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any more questions, or you're wondering, how to also further your education or your master's program in the US specifically, definitely, write a comment down below and let me know what you need. And also, if you have experience funding your studies in the US, also write your experience down. I think that can be really helpful for other people. Something I also, wanted to remind you guys is that I have a playlist where I put all my scholarship videos, so you can watch that here. And also I have another playlist regarding languages, which you can, watch here, languages that my passion too. And then, see you next time, and thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and keep on being inspired and into inspiration. Thank you. Bye-bye.